Hello everyone. So on this occasion, I will explain a little bit about generative AI. Is it a friend or foe? What we should know about it when designing assessments. So I'm Oscar Carnali, and I'm an associate professor and the dean of Faculty of Smart Technology and Engineering from Universitas Kristen Maranatha, and also I'm editor-in-chief of SAGE Journal of Educational Technology Systems. I'm also coordinator for Educational Activities Committee at Indonesia, and I'm also the lead of ad hoc team for GenAI regulations, and I'm also part of editorial board in several reputable journals. So this presentation is dedicated for International Conference on Educational Measurement and Evaluation, ICEME 2025. Okay, first of all, have you all tried to search your own name into generative AI? So I did it sometimes, and the results is actually changes over time. So, and this is the latest results that I got. And we can see here, basically, generative AI now is really good, I can say, because they can summarize my CV in general, and they even can provide some links on there. So, for example, here, the first one, I hold a PhD in information technology from the University of Newcastle, Australia, and that is taken from my website. And then also it explains about my Master of Engineering and the position. So I'm the Dean of Faculty of Smart Technology and Engineering since 2024, and I'm also Associate Professor. And then when we see next, so I also received a Triple Education Society Best Dissertation Award. That is also true. And research publications. So as you can see before, many of the informations are all true. But now in here, this is an example that actually generative AI does not really provide accurate results. For example, in here, 20 plus index corpus publications. So basically now it is like 100, more than 100. Of course, it is still true that it is more than 20, but it is more appropriate if they say it like 100 or something. Okay. And then notable research papers, also it is not really accurate because I have several papers that are more reputable, I can say, and the quality is like better. And it also sums my teaching, editorial, and volunteer roles. In here, you can see, yeah, I think it is also true in general. So that is one example about using generative AI. So if you want to search about facts or a person or something, we can easily use generative AI and they will provide the answer. But how about if we use generative AI to make creative works? So in here, I try three times for generative AI to generate a poem, okay? Poem or poetry about Manila. And as you can see here, when I try to generate three times, it actually provides different results. So as you can see here, basically it is quite different in terms of content. So the first one is Manila My Pulse. The second one is Manila City of Old and New, and the third one is Manila's Heartbeat. Okay. And actually, what they did in the background is they will try to somehow randomly generate a poem. So long as it is related to Manila, it is not a problem. They will try to generate it, and the results can be different. So we need to be careful when we give this kind of assessment to our students. So if we just ask, okay, make a poem about Manila, then they can use generative AI and it is undetectable. It is very difficult to detect because generative AI can provide different results and varied results. They can only provide like similar results if the question is about factual or maybe it's about something that is verifiable. So in general, this is the Gen AI characteristics that we can see. So first of all, it depends on the internet data. So one of the reasons why my name can be easily extracted, the information can be easily extracted from generative AI is because I put so many information on the internet. Because as a lecturer, I think we need to put all of the information on there. But if we do not put something on the internet, then generative AI will have no track records about us. Is it good or is it bad? Depends. Okay. So if you want like to, for example, if you want to have like privacy, then of course it is better not to publish your data on the internet. But sometimes when ChatGPT or Gemini can search or can provide information about you, then people can be easier to search about you in the internet. They will easily inform about your existence, your achievement, and that can be like considered as self-branding. And the second one, generative AI is focused on the majority data. So as we can see here, most of the data I think is from the US. So the results can be like US oriented. So if you ask something to generative AI, then do not be shocked that maybe some of the results is more about US centric or US oriented. So if you ask about maybe rare perspective or minority perspective, then it is usually difficult for generative AI to provide that kind of answer. Of course, except the generative AI is from other countries. So we know that there are like some other generative AI from countries other than US. And the third one, as we can see also in the example that the generative AI can be inaccurate. So the results may be still true, but not really accurate. Okay, as earlier they say that 20 plus publications. Yes, of course, 100 is 20 plus publications, but it's more accurate if they say that like 100 or something. Okay, that's why it needs what is called human verification. So we as a human need to verify the results. We cannot rely solely to the generative AI results. And in some cases, they will provide sources. As you can see in the example before, when I search my name, they will provide the sources. But when they try to generate like poem or poetry, or maybe if you can ask them like SWOT analysis, they won't provide the reference. Okay. And if they provide that sources, then you can check it whether it is true or not. And also we can see that from the second example that generative AI can be creative. So it can provide different response, especially if what you ask is about creativity, like writing a poem, writing a lyrics, making a figure or something like that. But in general, especially for the text results, we can see that basically generative AI employ a different writing style. I think there are several studies that try to find that kind of thing and try to observe differences between human writing and AI writing. So AI writing tends to be like different. They will be like less lenient and then less fluent, we can say. And then also at some points it can be like lengthy. And the most obvious part is like they will usually use emoticons, sections, and points. They are quite rare for human writings. So, knowing the Gener AI characteristics, now we move on current view on generative AI. So this is basically my study. So I observed like nearly 4,000 publications on social media, news, and scholarly publications. And generative AI is perceived as positive disruption because it can improve productivity, but there are like some drawbacks like over-reliance or misuses. So it is actually will be published in Springerling and Scopus soon. So it is like paper in a conference actually. And the second one is the benefits of generative AI in learning. So basically, there are many, many benefits, and we can see many publications related to that. But in here, I will try to discuss only for studies that I am involved with, so that I know that it is actually true. So the first one is like increased productivity. So for example, generative AI can try to summarize teaching feedback assistance, and it can be like helpful for the students so that they understand it easier. And it can also be 24-hour teaching assistance. So I have one research that try to design the generative AI so they will provide questions based on Bloom taxonomy. So the first question will be like the first level of Bloom taxonomy. And then if they can answer it, then they will move to the second question, third, and then we will move till the the level four, because that is like the minimum requirement for bachelor program. But there are again potential risks. So for example, in here, some people call it like misuses of generative AI. So it occurs when students are not allowed to use generative AI, but they use it anyway. So I think in the past, maybe like 2024 or 2023, we often find these kind of things because at that time we were not really ready to integrate generative AI. So what we did firstly is like perhaps we try to restrict the use of generative AI. And based on two control experiments, we observed that students with generative AI can complete assessments 2 times faster while having comparable performance. So if we restrict the use of generative AI and some students use it anyway, then they will get inappropriate benefits. And the problem become more concerning because generative AI detector is not always effective, especially if the contents have been paraphrased. So I have another study that tried to measure the effectiveness of generative AI detector, and I think at first the effectiveness is like 70 to 80%, but when the content is paraphrased by Quillbot, then it is reduced to 50%. So generative AI detector is not as reliable as plagiarism detector, like Turnitin. And the good thing is like students perceive generative AI assistance as similar to that of a college, so that we can easily inform students about what is generative AI misuses and what is plagiarism. And high school students are relatively aware of this kind of thing as well. And another drawback, which is also concerning right now, is this one, over reliance on generative AI. It is taken from MIT study. So they have like three groups of participants, one using large language model or generative AI, the second one used search engine, and the third one using brain only. So they do not use any kind of tools. And they will complete like 3 sessions under the same condition. And then we use electroencephalography to assess cognitive load during essay writing. And it shows that brain-only participants exhibit the strongest cognitive load and networks, while search engine has like moderate and LLM is like the weakest. So at some points we see that it is like quite acceptable because in search engine, when we use search engine, we still need to use our brain to think about what kind of results and then what kind of queries. But for LLM, we do not need to do that again. We just like provide the questions and then get the results and then revise it a little bit. And also, usually, like people with LLM, they do not really own the results. They do not think that the results is their own. And LLM users also struggle to quote their own work accurately, which is expected because it is generated by AI and they might not need to remember it. And over 4 months, LLM users consistently underperform at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. So, in conclusion, for this one, that we need to be concerned is that over reliance on generative AI may reduce brain activity and memory recall. So, while generative AI can be like useful, still there are like still drawbacks on there. So, it is it a friend or a foe? In our education, it depends on the learning outcomes. So basically, I can say that for higher order thinking assessments, GenAI might be a friend. Why? Because generative AI can help students to learn, and the solutions of the assessments cannot be instantly provided. So, for example, there is a case study and then they need to explore it in details. Then I think generative AI cannot provide the right answer instantly. And usually, students need to break down their task. So another example, obvious example, for example, if you want the students to make a website, then generative AI obviously can be helpful because generative AI can provide some kind of technical helps while providing the code. But still, the students need to align the code, need to verify the result, or something like that. So for higher order thinking assessments, it is can be a friend. But for simple assessments, it is indeed a foe. Okay? Why? Because solutions can be easily provided. So, in other words, when we give simple assessments and we allow students to use generative AI, they won't learn anything. But is it that thing that we really want? Providing like simple assessments to assess students? I do not think so. But again, that depends on the course design. Okay, I will explain later about a course design that actually still needs simple assessments. Okay, and then what educators should do. So first of all, we need to regulate the use of generative AI, and we need to inform students about the characteristics, especially about reliability and privacy. We need also to encourage students to verify generative AI results and then acknowledge the use. Let them experience the limitations of generative AI. So we can design some kind of sessions that cannot be answered correctly by generative AI and ask them to think about how to make it right. And this one is like regulation at my institution. So as I stated earlier, so I am the lead of ad hoc team for this one. So in general, the use of generative AI is not permitted unless otherwise stated. So if a lecturer does not say anything about generative AI, then it is not allowed. Okay. Why it is like this? Because I think nowadays generative AI is like really I think students really aware about that kind of thing, and we need to be concerned about that. So in here, we know that some of the lecturers, some of the teachers, maybe they are not digital savvy and they are not really aware about generative AI. And if they do not know, then usually like they won't mention that in the classroom. And it will be unethical if like we by default allow students to use it if the teacher does not explain that a little bit. So the use of generative AI is not permitted unless otherwise stated. So, for example, in my courses, I will usually explain students about generative AI regulations. But maybe for senior students, because they do not really aware about generative AI, then they won't discuss about that thing. Then by rule, in their class, it is not permitted. Okay, then this regulation is actually designed to be safe for maybe senior lecturers. And then the use of generative AI must be reported in the assignments. So they need to acknowledge it. So for example, if we have like some kind of writing task, then we will have like additional section at the end. So asking students, okay, need to acknowledge what kind of generative AI that you have used and for what purpose. And the third one, copying and pasting generative AI results is not recommended. So it is preferred that you get the generative AI results and then you try to align that with your own need. Okay. And this is also somehow a proof that the student actually understand what they are copying and what they are using. So now we will move to my case. So my experience about generative AI in programming. Basically, it can be like in any other courses, but because I'm teacher of IT, so it is will be related to programming. So the first case is about introductory programming. So introductory programming is quite similar with basic mathematics, which means that we want students to be able to calculate. That is in mathematics, right? So in here, we want students to be able to write program by themselves and understand the syntax. Okay. And on this course, generative AI use is restricted. We do not allow the use of generative AI. Why? Because GenAI can easily complete the assessments. And if we allow the use of generative AI, then students will not learn anything. They will just use generative AI and that's all. And we cannot achieve the learning outcome. They won't understand the basic syntax of programming and they won't be able to make simple programs. The second case is English for IT. So this is actually just accepted in an international conference and will be published in IEEE Scopus soon. So in here, I have like weekly assignments, and two-thirds of the assessments focus on students experiencing generative AI. But we try to divide the groups. So odd-numbered ID students can use generative AI only on odd-numbered assessments, and even-numbered students can use generative AI on even-numbered assessments. So in this way, they still experience completing assessment by themselves. So they will have like four, for example, we have like 8 assessments. 4 assessments they will experience completing with generative AI, while the other 4 will be without generative AI. And also, a third of the assessments focus on showing the need of human validation of generative AI results. So in here, we try to show the students that, okay, if you try to align the results, basically you will get better results. If you understand and if you paraphrase the result, then you will get better performance. And we have 2 topics here, SWOT analysis and also supporting data for a business idea, actually. So for each topic, 1 assessment asks students to use generative AI results with limited modification. So just ask generative AI and they just copy and paste and do minimum changes. While in the next week, they will be asked to verify the results. They will be asked to further update the results. And after that, we will mark these assessments, and I will show to the students that basically, hey, if you try to align further the results, the marks is a little bit higher. That is the purpose. And the third one is about machine intelligence. So basically, it is about AI and machine learning. And in here, we try to design assessments so that students are encouraged to ask generative AI first before asking the teacher or assistant. So in here, we want the students to interact with generative AI. And they can use generative AI solutions provided they are tailored to their individual writing style. And the questions here, the assessments here are considered difficult for generative AI to solve. And again, the purpose here, like students to learn how to interact with generative AI. And this is the fourth case, data science, but for management program. So students are asked to create programming solutions with generative AI, but because programming is not the core competency for management students, so we let the students to use generative AI to generate the code and just align with minimum modifications. This shows that generative AI can be useful as a tool for learning something new, like programming. So now I think all people can learn programming. So it is not limited only for IT people, only for people with technical abilities. No, not at all, because you can use generative AI just to provide the draft. But again, you still need to have the ability to verify the result, to understand the results. And this is the fifth case, object-oriented programming. So in here, again, I allow students to ask generative AI, but the solutions, any kind of solutions, need to be paraphrased or aligned to their own needs. Again, because in here, the assessments are considered difficult for generative AI to solve. And students, of course, are expected to filter the information they need from generative AI. And this is basically a short guideline for using generative AI for students and might be useful also for your students. So in general, first of all, it's like check the regulations. So if we as a teachers do not want students to use generative AI, then we should inform the students about that and we should provide the justifications. Because if we just say that, okay, you cannot use generative AI because I do not want you to use it, then it is not actually helpful, especially in younger generations that they are curious about the reasons. So we need to provide the reasons why. For example, in my case, in introductory programming, I explicitly said that, okay, because the learning outcome is to help you to be able to write code independently. And if you use generative AI, then the outcome won't be achieved. And after that, if students are allowed, then they can use it, but they still need to verify. So it is not recommended for students just copy and paste. And we can also provide them lower marks for copying and pasting generative AI results. And the second one, sorry, the fourth one, we need to align the results. Students need to align the results to their own needs. And then the last one, that is the most important, is like they need to acknowledge the use. So in many institutions, this kind of thing is like, I think it's quite common. So they need to acknowledge any generative AI helps. But I think in some reputable institutions, they will ask in details about that. So they will need a screenshot of whatever they do with the generative AI, whatever interactions that they have with the generative AI. But I think in some countries, to make it like easier, they will just ask, okay, just provide us uh, whether you use generative AI and for what purpose. And also, this is like my study actually with several college from other countries, mostly Europe. So it is basically about teaching and learning AI in K-12 educations. It has been accepted actually, but still needs time to be indexed in ICEME and Scopus soon. But if you want to see the teaser, then you can go on there. There is a teaser again. But the important part of that working group report, so basically I think it has like 25 pages or something. And I will try to focus in here for what things are beneficial for participants. So practical implications, of course. So there is a need for clear guidelines for teachers in integrating AI and or generative AI in their classrooms. So I think if your schools does not provide it, then you can ask them to provide, okay? Or otherwise you can design your own. So for example, in my case, I have institutional level guideline, and I can update it on my own classroom. You can see that I have like 5 cases of updated regulations. And additional training might be employed. So if it is needed, you can use it. And guidelines should focus on ethical and societal issues of generative AI. So it is not just allowing students to use it. No, it is really wrong. So we need some kind of regulations, some kind of maybe acknowledgements about generative AI use, or maybe we need to align something like that. Of course, we need also to consider about the learning outcomes, whether the learning outcomes is still achievable while we use generative AI. And again, another important thing is like pedagogic knowledge. So it must be considered while integrating AI or generative AI. We need to be careful because we do not want the students to graduate with limited ability, or they actually do not achieve the learning objectives. Okay, I think that's all from my presentation. Thank you.